Hi guys, welcome back. Have you ever had an experience with a religious person? I certainly have. And I consider myself a religious person. That makes no sense, does it? Welcome back to Whole Wellness. We're going to be talking about religious people today. Thank you for joining me. What do I mean when I say religious person? Generally speaking, I'm talking from my experiences with being raised Catholic and going to Catholic school and having a Catholic family of origin. The two people who have most negatively influenced my faith is my mom and my older brother. And the person who most positively impacted my faith over the years has been my counselor. For those of you who are new to the channel, just by way of a little bit of history, my mom, I believe, is an undiagnosed borderline codependent who has varying degrees of trauma, the extent of which I don't know what it consists of, from her own past and her own childhood. She frowns on therapy and scoffs at mental wellness, and as a result has never gotten help or healed from her own wounds from the past and her own trauma. That has negatively impacted everything about my mom, who she is, how she functions as a friend, as how she functioned as a wife in a marriage with my dad, how she functioned as a mother to me and my 5 siblings. My mom is now in her upper 70s. I have definitely forgiven my mom, and I don't harbor any anger or bitterness anymore towards her, but I also don't have a relationship with her. I recently vlogged about the last interaction I had with my mom, which was several weeks ago. Prior to the most recent communication I had with my mom, the last time I had any interaction with her was at Christmas when she asked to get together, but I was on vacation in Florida. And prior to that, the previous interaction I had with my mom was via text, and that was the fall of 2024 when she went off on me via text. And at that time, I had decided I'm done. And then she messaged me at Christmas time and wanted to get together. And I said, I'm in Florida. And then another 6 months went by, and she called me, I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, to ask me. She called me, first of all, at work. And if you've watched any of my content, you know, my mom and I, years ago, I had to establish rules with her in regards to calling me at work. And if it was an emergency, we had guidelines established, and she refuses to follow the standards and the agreement that we had set up for what's acceptable and appropriate for calling me at work. She called me at work, and I thought it might be an emergency, so I picked up. And I told her right away, you know, when I found out that it wasn't an emergency, I said, I'll call you when I get out of work. And I prepared myself mentally for this call because I knew that since it had been 6 months since I talked to her, she probably was going to completely catch me off guard and rile me up, so to speak. So I called her. That's exactly what happened. She asked why we don't have a relationship. She apologized profusely for everything she's done that hurt me and that she ruined my life, and she feels so bad about that. And this is nothing new for me. This has happened numerous times throughout my life where she's apologized, and then there's a couple weeks where it's good and we talk, and then she says something or does something that's manipulative, tricky, testing, taunting, mocking. It's not good behavior. As a mother, she's not loving, she's not kind, she's not supportive, she's not generous, she's not respectful towards me in particular. Now, my mom behaves differently with and treats my siblings in very different ways. My mom has a tendency to brag about and overinflate the supposed great relationship she has with one sibling in order to make another sibling jealous. My mom parentified me in youth, was jealous of me as a teenager, was jealous of my relationship with my dad, even though my relationship with my dad was not great, called me names, mocked me, ridiculed me, and then was also my best friend and called me her best friend. And so it was not a good motherly relationship. I did not receive good, wholesome, respectful, wise counsel and leadership from my mom as a woman. I never learned from my mother how to be a woman and how to respect myself and care for myself. I learned that on my own and from my girlfriends. My older brother was part of the 3 older siblings in my family dynamic, where the oldest brother was a grandiose narcissist, and my older brother and I had to adapt to the victimhood and the torment that we were placed in as a result of our oldest brother's torment. My older brother was born extremely intelligent and not very brawny. The oldest brother was very brawny. He physically beat on both of us and threatened us, and my older brother got the brunt of it and had to adapt to this torment when my parents were home. My dad was a workaholic. He worked 7 days a week. He was completely emotionally detached. So I'm just trying to give you the overview, and my older brother was born extremely intelligent, but he was the first victim of our oldest brother. He had to adapt to survive, and so he became the golden child, and he became very religious because my parents were also very religious, and we went to Catholic school, and we were an upstanding family in our community, and my parents really appreciated that kid in the family, the second born, becoming religious, never getting in trouble, and always being the one to tattle on the rest of the kids and to win at sports and win at grades and win at everything in life. It worked very well for him to adapt to become the golden child because that allowed him to survive our oldest brother. Me, I was not born with the brains that my older brother had, nor the brawn that my oldest brother had. So I was the youngest of the 3 older children in my family. And then there was a big chunk, like 4 years before the younger siblings, who were all forgotten children in our family. I was the scapegoat. I did not have the brains to adapt in a way that allowed me to succeed as a child in our family. I was born an empath and very sensitive and very nurturing and very creative. So from very, very young, I have memories of being just a very cuddly, lovable, cute, fun-loving, played with little bugs and colored nonstop and played with Barbies, just little girl. And then around the age of 5 or 6, I remember starting to change and feel like I wasn't okay. There was something wrong with me. But at that time, I didn't know what it was. And even to this day, I really don't know what it was that was going on in my home that made me feel or made me think that there was something wrong with me. I just felt like there was something wrong with me. I couldn't do anything right. I was always in the way. I was always a distract, and I was always in trouble. I was always the one who had to step in and be my mom's assistant and the substitute mom for the younger siblings when the younger siblings started to come along. And so it was about when my sister was 1, when I started to have to change diapers. And like, I remember being 5 years old and having to change my sister's diaper. I remember being tormented because my parents believed in letting the babies cry themselves to sleep. And it used to terrify me when I would fall asleep in the room with my baby sister in the crib next to me, screaming at the top of her lungs to the point where she could barely breathe. And my parents were out in the living room watching TV. And that terrorized me. And that originally, of course, was why I never wanted to have children when I became an adult and got married. Fortunately, that plan changed. But the dynamic between my brother and I has never been good, because when I was younger, when he began tattling on me and poking fun at me and nitpicking and bugging me and teasing me, it was not only his way of avoiding being beaten up by our oldest brother, because it was a way for our oldest brother to look up to him. So Our oldest brother would be impressed by my older brother picking on me and taunting me because it showed how tough he was. The more that worked and allowed him to succeed, the worse his and I relationship became. And I became this child who hid out in my room as much as I possibly could. And whenever my mom would leave to go to the grocery store or anything like that, I would be terrified of what was going to happen and how my two older brothers would torment me. So this was not a good dynamic growing up. As I became a teenager and a young adult, the manipulation and the pompousness experienced, and then the chaos and the heartache and the mind games that my mom continued to play on me created an environment for me where I was an adult that was in survival mode. And I was consumed with anxiety and stress. Even after I left the home and moved out and became an independent adult, I carried stress and anxiety and the inability to manage any kind of relationship into adulthood. In fact, I used to be very abusive and toxic towards my husband. And that is extremely embarrassing for me to admit, but it is the absolute honest to God truth. And I very openly talk about this with him and my two sons because I have changed so much over the years and our relationships have improved so much. It's evident that who I used to be and what I used to be was not good. And I was single-handedly setting our family up for failure and demise. And what is going on with my siblings and their respective families, or what has happened in their families over the years, is exactly where my relationship was heading as well, and my family was headed. And fortunately, we've turned the corner. I'm very, very grateful to my counselor for pointing out to me one day in a session that he doesn't understand why my family can't see that I am the most calm and conservative person in my family. And I said to him that it's because I used to respond and react emotionally to the onslaught of torment. And even into adulthood, it wasn't just in childhood when I was a defenseless little girl. It was into adulthood. I became a screaming, raging lunatic when things would come up and they would taunt and tease and mock and manipulate and ridicule and so on and so forth. And remember, this is coming from that religious Catholic/Christian home that my family is so proud of. So my experience with religious people is extensive, to say the least. There have been 3 experiences in adulthood that stand out to me as experiences with a Christian that has nothing to do with my childhood and has to do with behavior as an adult and the way you treat people and the way you interact that has really turned me off to Christianity. One was when I was a young adult, my dad took our whole family on vacation the summer after I worked in Yellowstone National Park, which was the year after I left college. And because I worked in Yellowstone, I pretty much planned the whole vacation because I knew where to go, where to stay, the most affordable places to go, the attractions to see, just the whole gamut, start to finish. And so the following summer, my dad took the whole family on vacation to Yellowstone. And throughout the entirety of the trip, my older brother, who was in college at the time, I mean, we're talking, he was 25, I was 23, maybe he was 23 and I was 21, something like that. He spent the entire vacation riding my butt about wearing my seatbelt, the way I talked, the way I dressed, the music I was listening to, how I would sit in the car, how I sat at the table, just everything. He was on my case about how I should be and everything that was wrong with me. And that was during a time when I had zero faith because of my experiences growing up. And this angered me even more, his treatment of me and his condemning me and his pompousness. And so I ran the other direction with regards to faith and anything that had to do with religion. I didn't want anything to do with it if that was the kind of person that a religious person was. The second experience was a couple years later when my brother took a forward that I had sent to all my friends. And this was back in the day when we all would just forward a bunch of funny jokes to each other. And he apparently didn't agree with something I had forwarded, and he stole everybody's name and email addresses in my address book and emailed his opinion and how wrong I was, everybody in my address book, all my friends. And that was not Christian behavior either. And I thought, I was so angry at him that I called him, and I'm not justifying me doing this, but this is what I'm talking about. When you're a person who has been mistreated for so long and you don't look into healing and getting healthy, you react. And the perpetrators spend their time gathering evidence of how loony and unhinged and unstable you are because you're responding in an emotionally charged way to their stimulation, which is mistreatment. And I picked up the phone and I called him, and of course he let me go to voicemail, and I left him a seething voicemail with curse words and everything, like, who the F do you think you are? I don't know what you think you're doing. If you've got a problem, you talk to me, and we need to talk about this. This is not okay, blah, blah, blah. He never called me back. Months go by, and I was on the phone with my sister, and I said, so have you heard from our older brother? Do you know what's going on with him? Because we had this experience and I was really upset with him. And she's like, oh yeah, he played your voicemail for the whole family. And I was like, wait, what? You've known about this? And she's like, oh yeah, it was like a week after you did that. He came over to the house and played it for the whole family. So I know you were upset and something happened. And I'm like, why did he play my voicemail for the whole family? This was between him and I, and he never talked to me about it. And at that time, that is what made me pick up the Bible and say, this is not okay. I know it's not okay. I remember reading it when I was a kid in the Bible where it says, if you have a problem with your brother, talk to your brother. Don't shout it from the rooftops. Talk to your brother. And if you don't get anywhere with your brother, go to another leader within the family. You don't announce it to the world. And that's what my brother did. That was when I started thinking about and paying attention to his behavior over the years and how it contradicted what the Bible said a person should emulate in their life, living as Jesus lived. Now, I'm not excusing what I did. Let's make that clear. Because if I had behaved that way with Jesus, even though Jesus wouldn't have taken my voicemail and blared it for the whole community to hear, he would probably have stopped talking to me, or he probably would have looked at me and said, do we have an issue we need to resolve? And he would have said it calmly and matter-of-factly. Jesus never raised his voice at anyone. And if there's one thing I've learned from reading the Bible, it's that the whole point is to live as Jesus lived. And when it comes to religious people, I have not found that to be true. I have rarely found a religious person that lives that way. That was the second experience. And the third experience was a couple years after that when Pinterest became a thing. And I had had Pinterest for probably 6 months, and I was gaga over filling up all these boards and creating boards for various things. And by that time, the wounds had kind of numbed. My brother and I have never resolved anything in our relationship. We've never talked about the past ever. And at some point in time, I became aware and found out that this brother had gotten a Pinterest account. And I followed him, he followed me, and he started posting stuff about hunting. What used to be a big hunter, and he posted stuff about yard work and a bunch of other stuff. Well, he didn't have his account for very long before I saw him pinning naked pictures. That's the sort of thing that I guess I sort of expect from some men. But for this Christian man to be publicly pinning naked pictures, I was like, oh my gosh, his wife has a Pinterest account. She's going to see this. And this is before, okay, in the last few years, Pinterest has changed. And now, unless you go to the person's Pinterest to see what they pin on your feed, you don't know who's pinning what. But in the early days of Pinterest, on your home screen, on your feed, it would show each person that pinned everything that you follow. It would say, you know, your brother pinned this, your sister pinned this. Whoa, the lighting just shifted. And that's how it used to be. And so when I saw that my brother was pinning naked pictures of all people, Katy Perry, I was disgusted because he's a religious person. And I was like, I don't want to know about him pinning pictures. And I thought, as I have been prone to do my whole life, I don't just CYA and mind my own business. I do want to try to help others when I see them heading for a head-on collision. And I thought, oh my gosh, my brother's wife is going to see this stuff and this is going to cause problems between the two of them. So I picked up my cell phone and I texted him. I said, hey, did you know that your Pinterest is public and I can see the naked pictures of Katy Perry that you're pinning on your Pinterest? And you know how he responded? Who's Katy Perry? And I was like, what? I said, I guess it doesn't matter who she is, just so you know, your Pinterest board of naked pictures is public and I can see the pictures you're pinning. And then there was this long 10 or 15 minute pause where I assume he panicked and went to his Pinterest and started deleting things. Because then he responded, oh, my son, his stepson, must have gotten hold of my phone and pinned those. And I went, really? I don't think so. Most of the time, my gut instinct is correct. I would say about 90% of the time, if I don't hit the nail on the head, I'm very, very close in any given situation. I can predict things based on what I'm feeling in the moment, how things are going to go. And there was something about the way my brother responded to me and the way he interacted with me that made me go, that's not what happened at all. You know darn well this is your Pinterest board and that you pin those pictures. You're lying to me. And within, I would say, I think 3 days, maybe a couple weeks, his Pinterest was shut down. Another example that I might as well tell you that came from someone else was a friend of his that I got to know when he lived in our hometown years ago before he moved to Texas. I met her through their work and got to know her, and she and I became really good friends. Last year, I connected with her for lunch, and towards the end of the conversation, towards the end of lunch, she said, you know, I always wondered if you knew what happened with your brother. And I went, what? I knew that there was a big to-do with regards to him and sexual harassment of a female student. The truth of which, I have my doubts. I feel very 50-50 about that whole situation. It was brushed under the rug and nothing ever came of it. This friend, we're talking 20 years later, 25 years later, I'm having lunch with this friend of mine who used to work with my brother. And I thought she was talking about the sexual harassment thing when she asked me that question. And she said, no, didn't you ever know about what happened with the church before he left that school and moved to Texas? And I was like, no, what church? What do you mean with the school? Because it wasn't a private school. I was like, what church thing? Well, apparently they had gone to the same church. She knew the owner. She was friends with the people who owned the house that he was rented, and they all went to the same church. And the person who owned the house that my brother was renting was the pastor or assistant pastor or something of the church. And I don't remember exactly what the circumstances were. But after my brother left and moved to Texas, this pastor or assistant pastor, this person who owned the home my brother rented, came to this woman that also went to church that I'm friends with, that also was friends with my brother, to privately ask her about some funds that were missing from the church. And she knew nothing about it. And my brother was the treasurer at the time. And there was, I don't know how much money missing that they never actually found or recovered, and they were very suspicious that my brother took the money. This is all hearsay, but over a lifetime of being related to my brother and the experiences that I've had, it's a situation that just stinks. I don't think he's an honest person. I don't think he's a genuine person. But these experiences with religious people are reasons why I stayed away from faith for so many years. But ever since I had a positive experience with my counselor, which not only was positive in the spiritual way, but everything else that came as a result of me being open to counseling with him and being open to learning what it meant to be healthy and have healthy relationships. And he was the single biggest positive influence in my life with regards to spirituality. It was my counselor. And everything that I have right now with regards to a successful career, good job with excellent benefits, incredibly beautiful relationships with my husband and my kids, mutually beneficial and beautiful and wonderful relationships, a return to my art that is growing and becoming very successful, my fitness journey and success, and my spiritual peace and joy and gratitude. All of this positive, life-changing stuff has come to me because I've been open again to spirituality and faith. And the more I read and the more spiritually connected I become, the more I'm realizing that most of the religious people that I know and self-proclaimed Christians do not behave like Christians, which is what's turning off everyone to Christianity. And what is our number one goal as Christians? To share the faith, to live and improve, be the proof of who and what God is, and not to scare people, well, not to turn people off, but to love them and teach them what it means to be religious or to be a Christian. I hope that you're not turned off spirituality and faith just because of your negative experiences with religious people. It took me decades to come full circle back to my faith. And now it's stronger than ever. And every time I hit a speed bump or a rough spot and I feel weak and I feel angry and I vlog something that's very distressful to me, all I have to do is stop and think for a second. Stop and pray. Stop and remember my healing. Stop reacting. And I think, wow, this healing thing, this healing concept and faith go hand in hand. There's not one without the other. It's a partnership. And what incredibly beautiful lives can we have if all of us who are self-proclaimed Christians began actually living and interacting with people as Christians, as Jesus did. Thanks for tuning in to Whole Wellness with Ann, guys. Until next time, take care of yourselves.